I produce Ozzie. So all the Ozzie Osbourne records, I'm sort of in the Osbourne family. And it was like, Mark, my wife is doing a television series in London. I went, yo, Ozzie, that's great. Mark, will you go with her? I went, well, Ozzie, it's like, why aren't we going to make another record? I know, Mark, but go with Sharon. So Sharon called me up and said, Marky, I'm doing a show with Simon Cowell. And I met, the Simon? Yeah, and it's called The X Factor, and it's his own show that he owns, and we'd love you to be on it. And I said, well, I don't like reality shows because it's always like, oh, the family was destroyed, or this guy has a crew cut and this woman had a wax. It's just, there's so many things that we don't want to know with reality about it. It's a scary, like maybe you want to know, but that's the whole problem. And so I said yes, and I did the show sort of like because I'm close with the Osbournes. I became pretty friendly with Simon, and then the show became this huge hit. And I don't know how that worked. And I'm like the vocal coach on the show. So when you see, Betty and Frida and Johnny, I'm the guy that's like slapping and going, no, sing it like this. And for some strange reason, I came out of a subway in London, and these school kids were there, like all in their little uniforms, and they started screaming. And I turned around like, wow, maybe McCartney's here, like looking around thinking there was a Beatle. But it was for me! I was like, oh, it's Weird Beard, it's Weird Beard. They called me Weird Beard. And they were and it just was the scariest thing. Everyone wants to be famous for that brief time, but this was like sort of a frightening thing for me. So I became Weird Beard, and next thing you know, the series worked, and now we're in our 4th season of me I get invited on all the shows, and I can go, if ever you guys are in London and I'm there, I can get you in any restaurant. Hello, it's Weird Beard. Boom, table for everybody, like Elvis would do. It's so, I'm having fun, it's not really a matter of being famous, it's just really, really fun to be there. And I got to go to Abbey Road when George Martin was playing the first incarnations of the Love album. So I was hearing all of this stuff like the first time, and Ringo would go, Mark knows everything about the Beatles. Yeah, well, what drum track is that, Mark? Trying to call, and I said, well, that's the drums to Lady Madonna. And George Martin goes, he's right, Ringo. Yes. And it was actually tough to fool me because I kind of knew all of the inside stuff, only because I always say this every time I'm here. The only bigger fan than you guys of the Beatles is this guy, because I should be sitting out there watching. Like last night we were with the Quarrymen, and I actually had sort of a fruity moment. Not that I am a fruit, but that moment of fruit hit me like, I'm with the Quarrymen, I'm with the Quarrymen. Maybe that's oversharing, but there's just like, there they were. And I was looking at them going, that's what John would probably look like now, because they were all in the same age group, really. Isn't that weird? I thought John would kind of be Quarryman-like.
Indeed. Well,
it's cool.
By the way, for those of you who just joined us on the webcast, you're on the Fruit Hour with Mark Hudson. What's My Fruit is basically the new show. Now, one of that things, not many of you, because it was a lot of blizzard last night and not everyone was here, on Friday evening we always have an opening session, which is all the guests, special guests on a panel together. And I noticed that something that Mark did, which was really beautiful, was when we were chatting to the various folks and the Quarrymen, and I noticed Mark squirming on his chair in excitement, but we had some conversation with the wonderful Norman Smith, who was the Beatles' first engineer, did all the recording balance all the way through Rubber Soul. And when it came to talk to Mark, and we were talking about what his contribution was to Ringo's records, how he literally single-handedly revived Ringo's recording career, for which we are exceptionally grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.
You started talking about how much you'd been influenced by Norman.
By Norman. In fact, the best part about me was that when there was Norman who did all that early stuff for the Beatles up through Rubber Soul. And he started talking about the comfort zone. Like he said, he let the Beatles set their instruments up in a fashion like you would do when you were rehearsing, so that John was right next to Paul and Ringo was right here and there was George. As opposed to when you record, when you make a real record, the piano player is in his own booth in Manhattan. The lead singer's in Cleveland, and you're so separated because they want the sound to be separated. And Norman was saying, I wanted the band to feel comfortable playing the music that they play with each other. And I went, wow, how great is that? And then I thought, I was kind of like inwardly bragging, going, that's how we do Ringo. Ringo's like right here yelling at me like, Mark, make a quote. So we're so close. And I said, and Martin had said that Ringo's new sound, and he was giving me a compliment saying that I was so responsible for it. And when in reality, I wasn't really responsible for it at all. I took steps backwards to what Norman and Jeff Emmerich and those guys had created and just made it happen again with a new generation that didn't know what that was.
Right, and I thought you were, that's a very generous thought as well
That's true.
to reflect that. I think we know that Ringo had gone through a bit of a slump in the recording thing. When it happens to all artists, you know, and Ringo was doing a couple of things, there were a couple of disco things. I mean, hey, Rod Stewart went disco, a lot of artists went disco.
So the Rolling Stones went disco.
And the Stones went disco. Thank God the Beatles themselves never went disco.
Thank God.
But Ringo had been following various parts. There were a couple of good records, but there were a couple that were, you know, not so good. Ringo himself said he wasn't happy with some of them.
Yeah.
And then you come along and you really revitalised it. What was the passion for you to do that for Ringo?
I really think what it was, when you look at the way that he writes songs, you know, Don't Pass Me By and Octopus's Garden, he always sort of had a sense of fun in what it was he was doing. I think that some of those other records, they tried to make him really serious. And I think that even though he can be serious, it's like when we wrote King of Broken Hearts on the Vertical Man record, it was a very serious song that George ended up playing slide guitar on. Hold on. No, go ahead.
He just wants to look like thinkers. We're thinkers here. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming. I had a McCartney moment. Cheers, thanks for coming. And I really think what ended up happening was he had a comfort zone and he would say later on to me that John was more responsible for it, being the sort of cheerleader, like, come on, Ringo, you can do this, man. And that John always made him feel like he could do stuff beyond what he could do. And I think I sort of brought that back to him, but I was a huge fan. Like sometimes, you know, he would do this just to screw with me. He'd be playing the drums, and all of a sudden I would hear the hi-hat change, because he was the first guy, for any musicians out there, you play a hi-hat like this, but Ringo did this. And we'll be playing a song, and all of a sudden I'll hear, and I hear that sound that I knew so well, and I was like, and I'd turn around, and he'd just be there smiling at me like, oh, you bastard. And then he'd go back and be regular Ringo all over again. So I think what I did was I sort of like regenerated a piece of him that he sort of had in his past with the lads that made him feel comfortable that he could do new stuff. And that's why I look back at that work. By the time we got to Ringo-Rama, he was having sort of a depressed day once. You know, I don't like my drums anymore, Mark. I only have 2 drum fills, Mark. That's all I know, Mark. And he was like really blue. He didn't sound that bad, but I made that up. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I said, why not do something? He went away to have a cup of tea. And I thought to myself, okay, what can I do to like musically, like, you know, kick him in the bum? And all of a sudden I said, let's do this. This drum, I came up with this groove that was almost more Ozzie-like. Oh, I'm off, you stole my groove. No, Ozzie, stay out of it. And it was a song on, you like me. Just when you just admit it.
Yes, no, I'm having a fruity moment.
Thank you. Well, you're my favorite fruit. And so when he came back from lunch, he said, Ringo, what do you think of this? And I played the guitar riff. And all of a sudden he went, woo. And he sat behind the drums, and a new Ringo appeared. And even on the interviews that we did for the album, he said that track might have been the best drumming that he had done in the last 20 years. And all it really was the fact that I loved him, and I knew that he was feeling bad about himself, and he is and always will be the best drummer in rock. And that's just the truth. And I've worked with everybody. So I have Aerosmith and Ozzie, and I've worked with Vinnie Colaiutas and all these guys. There's not a drummer better than Ringo Starr, because no one I've ever met plays a song as well as he does. And that's what he learned from being in the Beatles, is to know when not to play. That was the truth. Oh, let me say, this is really cute. No. I always get to ask a few Beatle questions, and he would let me have them. And I was thinking about Something in the Way She Moves. Something in the way she moves. And that, you're asking me where my love grows. And his drums are going, playing through the whole bridge. And I thought that was so cool. And I went, Ringo, how did you do that in the bridge? It was so great. I mean, you're playing drums like a crazy man through this entire beautiful ballad. How did that happen? And he goes, John and Paul were on vacation. There was no one there to say no. That was great. So he and George, it is so great. And those are the stories that I hold on to, big time.
Now, one of the things that I think everyone was moved by was when Ringo wanted to do a tribute to George. And this was something really special. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was really, obviously a very difficult thing because of how close they were, as well as with John. And Ringo wanted to, at first his idea was he wanted the song to be about John, George, and Harry Nilsson. His original concept with his friends that have crossed over, he wanted to do a song about them. And we started to come up with what this idea was, and then all of a sudden, lyrically, and Ringo is very lyrical, believe it or not. Like a lot of the Beatles songs, although not credited, I think like Wearing Her Face that She Keeps in the Jar by the Door was a Ringo line. Hard Day's Night. A lot of these things, they came from Ringo. And through his lyrics, it just sort of shifted. And Harry sort of went away, and John sort of went away, and it really became focused on George. And it was so, like a beautiful thing for me to be involved in, but so emotional. I had to hide my emotions seeing how sad he was about it. And he could not sing the song for almost 3 weeks, close to a month. So I had to be stunt Ringo. I had to go out and sing the song because he couldn't get through it because of what it meant to him. And then, and that's very, very sad in one way, but then the humorous part of it was Eric Clapton comes to play guitar. George's best friend is coming to play the guitar solo. Now, isn't this great that a guy like Clapton, you think he's going to have an entourage, people rubbing his neck, naked go-go dancers, a manager. You're just waiting for this sort of puff daddy, like, yeah, motherfucker, I got it. You're waiting for that sort of, yeah, I got my posse and my Clapton. It wasn't it. He got out of his car, and I'm like looking at him, and he gets out of his car, opens his own trunk, gets his guitar, and gets his amp, and walks out like he was a 17-year-old kid coming to his friend's house. And there, to me, is the essence of music and rock and roll as we know it. To me. Okay, so he comes in, and you see, he and Ringo do all the well-wishing and the this and that. And once again, I float this line that's so difficult for me because I'm such a huge fan, but I have to be the producer. Hey, Eric, how's it going? And I'm really, really cool. But I was wetting myself. Eric Clapton. But then I have to be cool, like, Eric is in E demented. I'm like saying things to sound like a producer, but I was like, just a fact that he handed me his guitar. And I think when he did that, I might have even made a noise like, and I kind of blew my cool just that one moment. I gave him the Cowardly Lion. Just for a moment. So he goes, let me hear the song, and we put the song up. And he hears Never Without You in the track with me being stunt Ringo. And he hears it and he gets kind of moved by it. Puts his hand in and it's like one of those moments that you would never think that you'd be part of in your life, but there I was. And he looks at Ringo and goes, great vocal, man. And Ringo goes, it's not me, it's Mark. And I went, and then I tried to overcompensate for me being stunt Ringo. Hey, because he was upset, so I became stunt Ringo, and he goes, oh, you sound just like him. And Ringo goes, oh, you should hear him do John. I went, no, don't make me do that. And he goes, I go, George. And so Ringo then makes me imitate the other Beatles in front of Eric Clapton. It was, oh, God, I could not have been more embarrassed. Thanks for coming. No,
did you do it, though?
Of course I did it. I had a Beatle pointing at Paul. I did Paul. Thanks for coming. Oh, cheers, man. Thanks for coming. No, I did them all. But this is a guy that knew them. It was a rough crowd. Okay, so anyway, we finished the song, and Ringo, he had trouble singing it because of what it meant to him. And then when we decided to do the video for it and stuff, he wanted to make it seem like the Ed Sullivan Theater with those real old-style cameras. And in the lenses of the camera, he had pictures of George, like from Bangladesh, and then pictures from George with the Beatles. And it truly is, I mean, I'm so proud to be a part of that song because of what it meant for Ringo. And, I get upset with the way that the music industry is now, the fact that they wouldn't have taken a song like that, and it wouldn't have gotten more airplay because of what it meant to him. I think we should give back to them just a little bit for everything that they've given to us. That's how I feel. And that's with all respect to, Paris Hilton and all those other kids.
The thing about the live performance, we saw that an amazing live performance. We've been begging for it for years, and then we saw those live performances. Tell us a little about those.
The live performance.
Yes, we're getting the Roundheads up on stage.
Well, you know what it is? Here's what the difference is. The all-star bands are great too, because Ringo says to me, I'm a drummer, and I'm supposed to drum. So he loves playing drums for anybody. That's what's great about him. And after all these years, you figured he'd be jaded or tired or egotistical. He loves playing the drums. And if you're sitting there and there's a groove, he's going to sit down behind a kit and be your drummer. And God bless him for that. And in the All-Star, he gets to play all these other hits for everybody else. With the Roundheads, we were a band that was only supporting Ringo Starr. And so therefore, it wasn't about doing anybody else's hit other than Ringo Starr or Beatles stuff. And so therefore, the Roundheads' attitude was a little bit sort of, oh yeah, watch this. And I tried to convince him to do some songs that he had never done since the Beatles. Like when we first did Octopus's Garden, he said the last time I played that was at Abbey Road when they cut it. And the same thing with Don't Pass Me By. And he tried to do Back Off Boogaloo a couple times with the All-Stars and couldn't pull it off. And I refused to have that happen, so we worked it out, and it did. So he lets the Roundheads do 2 Beatles songs. And he goes, well, I'm going to do a Beatles song now, but one of them will be off stage, meaning himself, because he won't play Beatle music. So my friend Gary Burr does You Can't Do That, and I'm a man on a mission. I'm thinking, I'm going to do a song that's so infectious, Ringo can't stop himself from playing. So I figured, I'm going to pick Long Tall Sally, right? Oh, tell her, baby. And then from that, I'm going into like a medley to I'm Down. Well, you tell her I'm big and I can see. Original key, G, when Paul had tight underwear. It's great. And then I'm going to finish it off with Oh, Darling. When you told me. And it's just, Ringo's going to go so crazy, he's not going to help himself. He's going to run up here and just play drums galore. So he goes, oh, my cousin, and we start the song. I won't tell him, man. And we go into it. And we're like rocking big time. And I look off stage and down in the little dressing room area, I see Ringo. And he's doing the Ringo dance from Hard Day's Night. And I'm going, I'm getting him. And then it gets to I'm Down. Man, my Ringo throws it away. I look over at it again, and now he's like air drumming. Like this. And I'm going, he's mine. We get to Oh, Darling. When you told me. Dun, dun, dun. And I'm nailing, if I were to brag, I was nailing this vocally big time. I look over at him, and I give him the head shake, like, come on, like, get out here, play the drums. And he goes, Now, those of you at home can't see what I just did, but it was a gesture.
A very nice gesture.
A very nice gesture. And no matter what it was, I couldn't get him to do it.
Ah, that's so glorious. I remember my dear mentor, Derek Taylor, when I chatted with Derek, wonderful man. He gave me he did very few interviews. I did an interview with him just shortly before he passed. And I was talking to him about, and I was expressing the sadness of all of us fans, what a drag they broke up when they did, and if only they'd carried on, or if they'd done a nice grand finale concert with a pink ribbon. And he said, Martin, that's not real life. They gave us everything they could, and there's a natural time, it's in the Bible, to everything there is a season. And there's a time when you stop and you say, let's move on and move to fresh pastures. And you and Ringo have reached that point where you've done so much stuff together. Right. Now you've both got other things to do. You've got other projects, and you've decided that it's been a great thing, and it's time to move on for a bit.
Well, the sadness that sort of surrounds me now, and I can't really think of a better place to actually really announce it, but here, because this is like family to me. I try to be here every year and stuff. And Ringo, as an artist, has every right to want to try new stuff. And although that's a scary thing to me, I just finished mixing the live album from Chicago, which will come out in the end of May. And then the record that we were working on before, we brought in Dave Stewart to do some songwriting. Dave has been a friend of mine. I've worked with him with Bon Jovi or Anchovy, one of the Jovies. I worked with him. And Dave comes from a different sort of school. It's sort of that, sweet dreams are made of this. He has that sort of synthetic thing. And Ringo actually loves that. And would say, hey, come on, Mark, play the strings on the synthesizer. And I just couldn't get my heart to do that. I said, no, let's do the strings at Abbey Road. Let's make this be like a band. And Ringo wanted to always be like progressive and try that new stuff. So what's happened now on this new record that will be coming out, I think, in the end of June, is going to be, it's now co-produced by Ringo, myself, and Dave Stewart, because Dave Stewart has now like joined the team of adding that sort of quality to it. Now, at first I could say I was crushed, and I was, and I could say that I was very saddened by it. But then I knew what art is, even for me. And you know something, every artist has a chance to use a new color. You have to allow that no matter what. And so at the end of this, it'll probably be like 7 albums that I've produced with him and for him, which probably breaks a record, I think, post-Beatles, for them sticking with any one producer. And I think I have to let him try to do this. Although it's like, you know, a sad thing for me, I'm not going to really know the outcome until afterwards. And who knows, he might go out there and love this, and that might be the end of the line for me. And then all I have is the work that I did do, and the way that I knew John, and the way that I got to hang out with that sort of stuff. So if that's what the case is, I have to be ready for that, whether I'm ready for it or not, because it's not my art, it's Ringo's art. And I, like I said before, he's the best drummer that I've ever worked with, and will be my best friend forever. That does not go away. So, saddened as I may seem, that's just the way that it's got
Now, you've, of course, worked...
Well, I was on the right, but Dave Stewart will never do Long Tall Sally like I did. I'm just kidding. That's a joke.
And he wouldn't just wear the tights tight enough. I mean, there's no way.
Steady.
So,
Thank you.
I'm thinking, of course, your other work. You work with Steve Tyler, you work with Ozzie, you work with Hudson, you work with so many other artists. Who are the other folks you haven't worked with yet but you'd like to have a crack at?
Well, obviously, I mean, you know, it goes without saying, my biggest dream of them all is McCartney. Only because, you know, the song that I won a Grammy for with Aerosmith was Living on the Edge. And that's what actually brought Ringo to me, because it was very Lennon-esque. Something's wrong with the world today, don't know what it is. Something's wrong with our eyes. Very John. And so I would always think that the part of me that was so inspired by Lennon might be the one ingredient that Paul could use. Just a little soupçon of John, a little teaspoon of Lennon. And I just got to feel, and I'm not comparing myself to him in any way, shape, or form, but I think attitude-wise of that dark sort of, it couldn't get no worse, that sort of thing is all over me. And if I had any wish, it would be to produce Paul McCartney. If I do that, then I can just take myself out of it and I'll be happy forever.
And apart from Paul, are there other artists in the world that you listen to and you think, I'd love to lend a hand or have a bash?
Well, no, you know what it is? There's like a lot of young, I like new talent. You know, because I work, you know, with Ozzie and all that stuff and all these people, and that's really, really great and fulfilling. But, you know, they don't really need me or anything. Whereas a young band, like when George Martin first had the Boys, there was this sort of drive and necessity. We need that producer because he knows more than we do. How do you do that? And you can say, well, you do it like this, and because of that, and because of that, and they listen to you. When they finally reach that certain stage, you know, it's like, you know, Steven Tyler, who's like one of my dearest friends, and he's got like childbearing lips, and so much of his stuff is, and he even talks like that now. So Steven, you want to try to go to the coast? And like I need an interpreter or subtitles just to go through it. Ozzie's a whole other thing, and you know what's great? You know, Ozzie is not, everyone thinks, oh, he's the Prince of Darkness. And number one, he's a huge Beatle fan. And McCartney actually signed an autograph to him that Ozzie has put in a gold frame and displays that in front of every record and monument to Black Sabbath and Ozzie. He's got his picture of Paul McCartney. And when the album I did, he wanted to do In My Life and Woman by John Lennon. He truly is that romantic and that special. It's just that he's really funny. And like, you know, I shouldn't digress and go to an Ozzie story instead of a Beatles story, but I Heimlicked Ozzie and saved his life once, which I will share with you now. So the first time they said to me, I had already done Living on the Edge, and I was a genius in my own pants for that moment. And they said, oh, you got to work with Ozzie. And I went, you know, I don't know if I want to work with Ozzie. You know, he eats bats, and everything is painted. Like I have room to talk now. I'm a walking Picasso. And I go, I don't know if I want to. But someone gave him my phone number. And my phone rang one morning. I picked it up. And hello, Mark, it's Ozzie Osbourne. Hi, Ozzie, how's it going? I'm going to kill the person that gave him my number. And he goes, listen, you wrote that song, Living on the Edge, for Aerosmith. I went, yes, I did. He goes, brilliant, very, very Beatley. It's very Beatley, that song. I went, yeah, I know. He goes, I want to do a record. Ozzie does Sgt. Pepper. Now, I waited for that little moment, and I went, okay. And then he said it again. Ozzie does Sgt. Pepper. Pepper. And I went, well, Ozzie, that's great. He goes, and I wanted to do the record with you because I love the Beatles and I'd love to do Ozzie does Sgt. Pepper. And I went, you're not talking about doing Sgt. Pepper. He went, no, just a record sort of like Sgt. Pepper. And I went, well, that's challenging. I've never met this guy in my life. And then he says, Mark, you know why we can do it successfully? I went, no. He goes, because we're not fags! And he hung up. The first time ever in my life I looked at a phone receiver like in the movies. Like, what the hell was that? I didn't even know what he meant. So I figured, you know something, the fact that he loved the Beatles that much, which I did, is my biggest influence. And I said, if he loves the Beatles that much, I don't think he is the Prince of Darkness. I think he's a guy who was a Beatle freak who loved the melodies, and he's calling on me because he knows that I am too. They fly me over to London with my guitar player, and there's Ozzie's band, and they all have like hair that's like Kondo, like huge, big rock hair. And Ozzie comes in, and he looks like such a star. Like he walked in the room, and he had the Lennon glasses, which he does on purpose because he loved John. And he comes in, and he's got this Scottish assistant that you can't understand. And he was chain-smoking Cuban cigars, and he'd go, Tony, a cigar. And the assistant would go, Ozzie, put a cigar in it, and Ozzie would start smoking. Now I'm looking around like, what have I done? And this kid I don't understand, and I go, Ozzie, do you understand him? And he went, no. Okay, and he's been with me for years. Okay, great. So throughout this writing session, Ozzie would just go, Tony, I mean, it was Braveheart all over again. Okay, so I know this. I'm not detouring from the Beatles, but now that I'm in this, I have to finish. Is that okay with you? Okay. And this is all surrounded in the fact that Ozzie was a Beatle freak, and the music will prove out to be that when you end up hearing it. Okay, so Ozzie sort of has an obsessed personality. Anything he does, he always does more than any Caucasian should do. Here, Mark, I can't just have one stick of gum. I need the whole pack. Okay. So he was going through a period where he was trying to be healthy, and I'm not exaggerating. Shaved almonds and coconut nibs and dried sunflower seeds and just like stuff that no one would ever really want to eat. But he was trying to be healthy. And he has this huge bowl. Tony, another bowl. Huge bowl. And Ozzie's just eating this stuff as we're playing this track. And he goes, and his cheeks are like out to here. He's going, Mark, can we do something sort of Beatley? And he's spitting on me like, I'm being like hit with trail mix. I love cold turkey. But I didn't know him well enough to go, stop spitting on me. So I had to just take this. I looked like a fruit salad by the time it was over. Okay, so I'm almost to the finish, I promise. Then we can go back to the other thing. He goes, like cold turkey. Okay, so I come up with this groove. Just like cold turkey, but similar to it, between cold turkey and bang a gong. And I see Ozzie just stuffing his face, his cheeks like he's going, and even little Tony, and you know what was weird? Tony, the Scotsman, had real short arms. Will you hold this? So it was like this. And you notice that when you see a bull in a cartoon, they never run forward, it's always like this. That's how he walked. I digress, I'm sorry. Okay, So we're playing this groove, and the band is playing. It's me and my guitar player, and all these guys with condo hair, and we're coming up with this, and Ozzie's just like sitting there, just stuffing his face, like, oh, this is and all of a sudden I see him get an idea because I do know creativity, and Ozzie's eyes go like, and you can see his little chipmunk cheeks, and he goes like, and he gets up and he comes towards the microphone. And he grabs the mic as it gets to this one part. And he cuts the band off. Now, it ends up being, in Ozzie fashion, when he did a lyric, "It feels so good to be bad," which is so Ozzie. But when he went to write it, he grabbed the mic and went, "It feels so," and he took a breath in and went, because he breathed in the trail mix. So Ozzie's going, and I'm looking around for a moment like something's weird, but he didn't move his head away or call for Tony the Scotsman. He's just staying on the microphone going, and then all of a sudden, excuse my French, the bass player who'd been with him for 20 years goes, "I think he's fucking choking." And I went, "He's choking!" And because he was turning like a color. So I take off my Rickenbacker, I run, and I figured, I kind of hit him on the back, kind of like, "Ozzie, go." Then I figured, I'm going to Heimlich this guy, and I've never licked anybody. So I figured, I figured, I'm going to put my arms around him, and just, if I break his ribs, great, but I'm saving this guy's life. So he's still on the microphone, and I, with all my might, just go, and then all of a sudden he projectile, and spit out, like, I'm talking trail mix. I could have repackaged it. It wasn't even, he didn't even chew it. It was like, it was Ozzie mix. It just, I could have sold it. He like spewed a major biscuit, and he's like, oh, like this. And then he got his color back, and he went, Tony, I'm going home. And they walked out, and I didn't see him for 5 days. I'm sorry.
Great story.
It's good.
That's a wonderful story. We've only a few moments left. We're going to do a little time capsule. We're just going to go for a brief second.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the Salerno house.
Oh, God.
On February 9th, 1964. Just for a brief moment to be in the Salerno house.
Wow.
So make that little Twilight Zone sound and take us back there.
Mom, why does it burn when I pee? No, I'm sorry. That was later on. I'm sorry.
Not back that
No,
far.
I enjoy my own company. I don't need any of you guys. I just sit in my car. I'm so happy with me. It's just good. That was such a huge moment for my entire family. And it was weird. You know, growing up in this Italian household, it was always singing and dancing, no matter what. All my aunts had mustaches. It was just, there always was this, hey, it was fun. And so my family, my mom and my uncles and my grandmother and all that stuff, it wasn't that sort of anti-Beatle move of who are these long hair. They were just like, we like these boys, the one with the nose. You know, they were fans. And so that night, when we knew we were going to see it, we were, my brothers and I were glued to the television. We'd already heard the music. We already knew that the phenomenon had started to happen. It had taken hold in all of our hearts. But you know something, to be that close to it, this is what the weird thing is. In this generation, we don't really know how important TV is, because now it's all with our thumbs on our iPods and our phone. But this was like a television screen, and I was sitting this close, and when they came out, I actually felt, now this might sound weird, I actually felt like I was there. Because Ed Sullivan, he set it up, and the screaming would begin, and all this stuff would happen. And there I was, just glued to this. And right away, there's no question about it. My eye just went straight to Lennon. There he was, you know, he had that stance, and he had that sort of thing about him. If I want to be any one of those guys, I want to be that one. Because that, to me, and it was weird, because my brother Brett looked like Paul McCartney with bigger lips. So he went straight, I used to go like this. My brother Bill liked to play lead guitar. So we all kind of, it's very funny because Ringo wasn't necessarily our favorite. I ended up working with him, go figure. Yeah, but so there was, in that moment, everything that they did was so right. It was so right. I just felt that from that day forward, that my life would change. I didn't know how, I didn't know what that was, or whatever. I just knew that what they were bringing to me was different than any of the, and I grew up in a musical household, so we knew Elvis, and we knew Sinatra, we had all that stuff going on, but this was something different. It was someone that I could relate to, like I could be him. I couldn't be Elvis, I couldn't be Sinatra, I couldn't be, but this was sort of like, they look like they're having fun like I have fun with my brothers. They look like they're saying something about the girl that I had a crush on, which I did, and that made sense to me. So I felt that my life had changed from that day forth. And then my mom, and I grew up without a dad. And so my mom actually was working in a factory, and she didn't tell my brothers and I that when the Beatles came to town, she had tickets for us to go see them. My mom, you know, and that's why, look at anyone who's got a mom, love them, because they're the greatest thing that will ever happen to you. Because that's the kind of love they give back. And when she showed up with that, you know, she could have bought like a dress or pasta, or she could have got her mustache waxed. She could have done so many other, don't look at me with love in your eyes. She could have done so many things, but she came with these tickets. And I remember being a young kid looking at her like, you could be the greatest mom on the planet. So there we are. The Beatles, live. And every girl, I mean, it was screaming like nothing I'd ever heard. And they walked on stage, and that thing that I saw on TV, I saw in real life. And that might have been my first and only homosexual moment. No, it's true. Every part of me was tingling. I didn't know what
I saw your laugh. I know that.
No. But parts of me were tingling and burning that I never knew even existed. Whoa. Things were happening. And I saw it. And then when John would do that thing with I'm Down, and they were having, you saw them have fun with each other. You saw them have fun with the crowd. I'd never seen anything so giving musically than what the Beatles were. And by the way, that has not been recreated since, if you can think about it. For all the great performers, I don't care if it's U2 or Prince, none of them gave out as much as those guys. And then from that point, I wanted to be John.
Well, our time has elapsed. How
no, I didn't get to the Cher story.
No. We'll get to that tomorrow, I promise.
Oh, okay.
Right now, because time is short, I want to say that not only have you been an amazing performer all these years, from the Hudson brothers, your solo work, your work with Steve Tyler and Ozzie, but what you've done for Ringo in the past 8-9 years, what you've done for his recording career and getting back on stage has been remarkable. And for that, if for nothing more, but you did so much more, but for nothing more, we thank you. Mark Hudson.
Thank you.